Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second virtual meeting of the Upper Thames Board of Directors. As a reminder, Chris is serving as our meeting host, so if you do have connection problems or issues, please call him either through the chat feature or his phone, which he is now on. Remind everyone, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Have your participant and chat windows open. And use the raise hand feature if you'd like to contribute to discussion. And that votes will be via roll call. Further reminder, all motions include predetermined movers and seconders to assist with the logistics. And I'll ask you to confirm those intentions as we deal with each agenda item. Also, in the interest of moving the agenda a little quicker, we're proposing not to move for receipt the 4 information items, because that would also require a roll call. So unless there's objections to that, we'll go forward on that basis. Hearing none. Finally, I want to note that today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Upper Thames YouTube channel as part of our requirement to allow public viewing of the proceedings. And I'll begin with the traditional territorial greeting. We begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anawandran, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lahapne people who have long-standing relationships to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation in Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of the local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island. Michelle, again, are there any regrets? Have we heard from Don at all?
No, I have not heard anything.
Okay, so can you call the roll so we can post attendance, please?
Marie Blosh, Alan Dale,
Present.
Don Edmiston, Anna Hopkins,
Here.
Tony Jackson,
Here.
Sandy Levin,
Here.
Nancy Manning,
Here.
Hugh McDermott,
Here.
Paul Mitchell,
Present.
Anna Marie Murray, Anna Marie,
She's muted her microphone.
I'm here. I was using the space bar. It didn't work today.
Brian Petrie,
Here.
Jim Reffel,
Here.
Joe Salter,
Here.
Mark Schadenberg,
Here.
and Alex Westman.
Here.
Okay, so first item is approval of the agenda. We have Brian and Jim as movers. Are you guys okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Michelle, could you call the roll on the move on approval of the agenda?
Marie Blosh, Alan Dale,
Yes.
Don Edmiston, Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Mark,
Hear nothing.
oh, I get
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Sandy Levin.
Yes. Marie, are you here now?
I'm on the phone with her, and she's kind of halfway in, but not all the way there yet. So we keep working at it.
Okay. The next item is declaration of conflicts of interest.
I think I can hear.
Does anyone have a conflict of interest? Hearing none.
Okay, I've got
minutes of the-
audio.
Okay, could you, Marie, could you mute your microphone if you're not speaking? Minutes of the previous meeting, Tuesday, April 28, 2020. We have down as movers Joe and Mark as a
Okay.
seconder.
I just muted you, so they were hearing you. Are you hearing everything now, Marie?
Chris, we're hearing you. Okay. Joe, Mark, are you okay with moving and seconding?
Yes.
Okay, are there any questions or corrections on the minutes of the previous meeting? Hearing none, seeing none. Motion is that we approve the Board of Directors minutes dated April 28, 2020, as posted on the members' website. Michelle, could you conduct the roll, please?
Marie Blosh, Marie,
Got on?
Hello?
Yeah.
This is Marie. Yes, whatever. I think
We're-
I'm finally here.
We're approving the minutes of the previous meeting.
Okay,
We're doing
yes.
the roll call.
Okay, yes, then.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Don Edmonston, Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Sandy Levin.
Yes. On to business arising from the minutes, and I don't know if we have access to put Tony's item up on the screen. I did email it this morning to everyone. This is regarding a point of order Tony raised prior to the last meeting, and with his agreement was deferred to this meeting. As a reminder, the issue stems from a motion put on the floor at the AGM. And after some discussion to understand the wording and the intent, there was a motion that passed to object to consideration of the question. And the budget subsequently passed based on the staff report recommendation. And at the April meeting, or prior to the April meeting, Tony sent his point of order indicating his disagreement with the actions taken. And Ian and I have consulted with Nigel Belchambers, a very respected professional consultant. He's worked with most municipalities in the watershed, trains members of councils for AMO. He also listened to the meeting recording, reviewed our bylaws, which frankly need some review and update. What he has recognized that there were a number of procedural matters, including the motion itself, being contrary to our administrative bylaws, no notice was given. Chair also didn't point that out. So the question at this point is regarding the point of order raised at the April meeting. And the question really is up to the chair to decide if it's in order or not, given the understanding that I have and Nigel has, is a point of order can only be raised at the meeting at the point in time. So whether, the discussion we had was a debate as per Roberts, the issue, the ruling of the chair on this is that since the original motion, it frankly was moot. The point of order is also moot, even if one accepts the idea that after a meeting you can move a point of order or raise one. So that in my mind, the point of order has no standing at this meeting. So I'd like to move on. Tony, I see you're raising a hand. I guess you were muted. Oh, I see you're right. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would appeal that ruling of the chair. And I need a seconder for that, if there is one.
Well, under Robert, I believe what you're challenging the ruling of the chair,
Yes,
and that's not debatable, doesn't need a seconder. Immediately goes to a roll call vote. And the question is, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained?
I
Michelle,
believe,
call the roll.
Mr. Chair, the appeal does need to be or can be seconded and is debatable.
Not according to Roberts.
Which Robert's Rules of Order are you referring to? Which version?
Which version are you referring to?
The 11th edition, newly revised.
Let me see my little cheat sheet of Roberts. Well, there are a number of procedural bylaws that I'm aware of, all of which say put to a vote without debate. So that's the ruling of the chair. You want to challenge that ruling too?
Sure.
Okay, so now we're in a circle. So I'm calling the roll on the challenge of the chair. Shall the ruling of the chair be sustained? Michelle, please call the roll.
Marie Blosh, Marie, Alan Dale,
No.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
No, I stand by that this is a violation of the procedure.
sorry, Nancy Manning,
I'm abstaining.
Hugh McDermott,
No.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Sandy Levin.
Yes.
Nine in favor.
That carries. We have no delegation. We have business of approval. Item 6.1, approval of the financial statements. Alex and Marie, are you willing to move in second?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've had problems with my mute. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you
Oh,
able
okay.
to? Are you able to second the approval of the audited financial statements?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm having so many problems with this computer, but so I'll fade in and out, but I'm here. So yes.
Okay. Just want to report before I ask for questions is that the auditors indicated 100% confidence that there were no misstatements. They complimented our staff for raising the St. Mary's matter, which is in note 10. They indicated in the report to the audit committee that there is room for improvement in some issues like the Camas bookings and the forestry invoicing, which are being worked on. But it was noted by the auditors that they weren't being material. And I want to point out again, the difference between the budget and the actual is an accounting issue with how we bring in deferred revenue into the current year. And I'll ask Christine to confirm that point.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a big discrepancy between our budget for 2019 and the actual. A good part of that had to do with the West London Dyke project that got carried over from the previous year. So we do carry a lot in deferred revenue. We can't always know when we create the budget whether the capital project will be finished by the end of the year or have to carry forward into the next year. So we are getting better, but we may not be able to always solve the problem of a potential big difference in capital expenditure between budget and actual. But we are trying to get better.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board on the financial statements? Seeing none. Also
Hugh had
want
his
to
hand up,
raise,
Sandy.
oh, sorry, who?
Hugh.
Hugh, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered why the tangible capital assets would be included in an accumulated surplus. I would think a surplus would be that you either don't spend some money or you get more revenue. So I was just wondering why that was included in surplus. Thank you.
Christine?
It's a terminology issue. The assets being included in total accumulated surplus really means that the assets form a good part of the value of the organization that has accumulated over time. So it's a year over year buildup of value. And if you yeah, we don't have it on this financial statement as well as my reports broken out. But the 44,443 million that forms accumulated surplus on page 4 of the audited statements, you can see 39 million is in our assets. It's our dam structures and buildings that make up the value of the organization. So in the private sector or in your personal life, that would be equity. Like your home is your part of your net worth. So accumulated surplus is maybe not the best name, but we as a nonprofit happen to have a lot of assets. Many charities and nonprofits don't. So on their books, it would just be accumulated surplus. So it's a naming thing more than anything.
Okay, nope, thank you. I was just a little confused at the wording, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Are there any other questions on the financial statements? Also want to mention before we move on then, one of the other matters that the audit committee dealt with was ongoing question about the hydro project and the hydro dam and the electricity that we sell to London Hydro. We learned we're still working on that issue. One of the matters right now is that the dam is not producing electricity for the grid because there are some technical issues between running the dam to generate electricity and its impact on our network and other electronics as we understand it. We've retained a consultant to try and troubleshoot that issue, but we didn't have a clear answer to that at the audit committee meeting and hope to have that the next time we meet. So are there any other members of the audit committee, audit and finance committee, that want to raise any matters arising out of that meeting? I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll call the roll. Are there any other questions on anything to do with the audited financial statements? So we have a mover and a seconder for the approval of the audited financial statements. Michelle, could you please call the roll?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Sandy Levin.
Yes. There are no closed session items to handle in camera. There is business for information. Item 8.1, the conservation areas, a tentative opening plan. Jen, do you want to just get questions directly, or do you have some oral update for the committee, for the
No,
board?
if there's questions, I'll just do questions.
Paul.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. Two-part question. As far as PPE, what are we looking at? A staff requirement for PPE? And also, do we have sufficient supply of that PPE? I know some hospitals are not able to start doing surgeries again because the government's requiring a 30-day supply of PPE. So if you could just interested in those two areas.
Sure. With respect to your first question, it really depends on the task that they're performing. We will give them the option to wear a mask if they would feel more comfortable with a mask, but they are to be adhering to the 6 feet, 2 meter distance, and masks really are only to be used if that can't be accomplished. That's not to, I guess, fill in instead of doing. And we've got standard operating procedures in place for cleaning of equipment after use. We've scheduled staff to be able to stagger their work times, working with the same person all the time. Those sort of measures are put in place. And we have been actually, in the parks as well as at the WCC, we do have a supply of masks available and other cleaning products. We've been kind of doing that inventory all along.
Paul, any further questions?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, Anna, then Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. My question is around the washrooms. I understand that they're not open at the moment, and just want to understand, is that going to be is that a difficulty right now when we are opening up the areas for people to come for day use? And just wondering how that is all going to work, and how much of your plan is dependent on the province restricting the gathering of 5 people right now, but hopefully as we go into the next phases, those numbers will open up, and just want to have a better idea of what we're going to be doing with the washrooms, what the plan is there.
Yeah, so right now, the province has said that we can offer seasonal camping. But the caveat there is the seasonal campers must be self-contained within their own camping unit. It goes on to further state that other areas of the campground can't be open to the public. So that includes the nightly camping, that sort of thing. And then when we look at our day use area, yeah, our day use area washrooms are going to stay closed at this point in time, because we just don't have an option. Otherwise, what will happen is our seasonal campers will be heading down to the day use area. Is that ideal? No. We're fortunate, I guess, in the sense that still the messages out there and the messages that we are expressing in the park is, you know, to come out and enjoy your time, but, you know, prepare ahead. So, you know, whether that means bring water or go to the washroom, whatever. But we are anticipating that there'll be the odd person that will catch in the bushes, I guess I'll say. And that wouldn't be a new thing, so.
Thank you for that. And again, through the chair, I know as we go into the next phases, will there be a new protocol for these washrooms? Is staff sort of looking ahead as we deal with the opening up of the washrooms?
Yeah, so we've been in contact with our health units probably every week, and we are working towards creating that plan of how we manage those washrooms.
Anything else, Anna? Okay, Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question revolves around maximum number of occupants in our parks. Obviously, we don't want to see something that happened in Toronto as it gets nice weather, people want to get out. How are you going to control the amount of people in the parks? Do you have a maximum number that you're going to adhere to and make sure that there is those enough space for everybody to socially distance?
So people have been coming to the parks all along, and people have been very well behaved, in the sense nothing like what we saw in Toronto. So they've been well behaved, coming in for free. Typically what we see in the spring in our parks is people are there enjoying the outdoors because the weather is great. And then as soon as those gatehouse opens up and people have to pay, we see some of those numbers go down. But we will have staff on site 24/7, and that they will be monitoring those activities as well. And we'll have to do enforcement and messaging. But if we need to, we can close down our gate too if we find that people are not adhering, or if we have too many people in at one time.
Nancy? Sorry, Brian, you still have the floor. Did I interrupt? Okay, Nancy?
Yeah, Jennifer, just a quick question. Do our enforcement people, can they fine individuals if they find like too many congregating, or, you know, people not obeying what our rules are?
Yes, so provincial offenses officers across the province were given that extra enforcement, I guess, privilege. For the most part, we have not laid those charges at all. We've just been doing enforcement if we see it as an issue.
Okay, thanks.
I see no other hands. And Jen, we're still targeting June 1st?
Yeah, so the day use areas are targeting to open for June 1st for for Fanshawe and Wildwood. Pittock is already open, obviously, with our agreement with the City of Woodstock. And then camping will open on June 8th. Seasonal camping will open on June 8th for our folks at Fanshawe and Wildwood. And then, folks at Fanshawe and Pittock. And then the June 15th is for Wildwood. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Just doing one more scroll, looking for hands on the participants list, seeing none. So this was just for information, so we'll move on to 8.2, the return to work plan. Ian, to speak to that, please.
Yeah, I think most things are in the report. I will say almost since we started working at home, we've been planning for return to work, knowing we needed this to be put in place. Jennifer's efforts and the opening of the conservation areas show that this will not happen all at once. This is a part of our business that's returning to near normal, but obviously with limitations. So for the rest of the activities that our staff are engaged in, the return to work, we're leaving that with the Joint Health and Safety Committee to develop. And the report gave some examples of the kinds of things we will consider. But I think the bottom line is this is very fluid, very much governed by direction from the province and from health units. So even though we will have a plan, I suspect that will be constantly updated and adapted as provincial direction changes. And frankly, we're very open to the possibility that we may have to retract and things may have to shut down again temporarily based on infection rates. So the point was we have a pandemic policy in place. We have standard operating procedures like Jennifer mentioned. We're securing all the PPE, to Paul's point, all the supplies that we'll need. So we will be ready, but it's a work in progress. So happy to answer questions.
Paul.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ian. At this point, the emphasis is on the safety of our staff and following provincial guidelines. So we're following all the rules. Once this pandemic's done, whenever that is, will there be a full staff review of procedures as far as staffing levels, working from home and those sort of things, with a plan to come to the board to maybe change some of the ways we do things from?
You broke up.
That's a great point that we're calling this. Okay, I'll shut my video off. There, Paul, it's a good point, and certainly the managers and the Health and Safety Committee are very aware that while this is a return to work plan for our current circumstances, we know some of these changes may be permanent, whether it's where we work, certainly how we work, will in all likelihood change for the long run. So again, that's part of what's fluid. And as far as bringing this to the board, as this plan's developed, once we have it to a comfortable point, we'll bring it to you. And I think as part of our annual updates to the board, at the very least, we would be highlighting what has stayed in or what other adaptations there are. So absolutely, yes, we will make sure you're engaged.
Thank you, Ian.
See no other questions. We'll move along in the agenda to item 8.3, the financial impacts and response. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, I'm going to leave my video off. Just my internet isn't that great here, so hopefully it helps. Just a few points here. I need to disclose that the staff report that you have is already out of date. You know, I sent the email late last week that with the news that we were not eligible for the emergency wage subsidy, so that changes How we manage things. Right now, staff are in the middle of reviewing the budget, revising revenue forecasts based on new provincial guidance as far as reopening. We're cutting expenditures, we're adding new revenue, and we're being as creative as possible, legally creative as possible, to try and manage the 2020 budget. And Christine deserves a lot of credit for this. I noticed I received a big email at 12:04 a.m. About this topic. The reality, though, is at present, we're facing a deficit with the numbers that we know right now and the revenue forecast we have right now in excess of 1.25 million. And that's combining the deficit that we had in our approved budget already in February of about 600,000, and obviously new expenses on top of that. So this is significant. A lot of this is driven by the conservation areas, not to point the finger at any one part of our business, but they are a big part of our business. Of our $21 million budget, the conservation areas are $4.5 million. And that revenue not only supports their direct operations, but it helps pay our overhead. In a way, we've used the conservation areas knowingly to keep levy lower by using some of that revenue to pay costs that support the rest of the organization. So that's why this becomes an organization-wide issue for us to manage, and why it's so difficult, because there's just so much uncertainty with what's going to happen in the future and trying to forecast revenues. So we're not in a position to give you a plan today. Managers met yesterday. Christine's working furiously to make changes to the forecasts and the expenditures. Managers are meeting again tomorrow to see where we're at. But I will say it is highly unlikely that we'll be able to mitigate 100% of these impacts within the 2020 budget. We expect the impact of the pandemic to extend into 2021 in terms of revenue and business operations. And our recovery, our financial recovery plan, will have to be planned and executed over that same time period. So I just want to make sure your expectations are managed, that at this point, barring a miracle, I would forecast we will have some level of deficit at year end because of the pandemic, but that our approach is not to just think of this as a 2020 issue. We're trying to plan longer than that. So the last thing I'll say at this point, in case anyone's thinking it, is no new levy is planned as a solution. We don't think that's on the table at all. Hasn't crossed our minds, but I just need to reassure you of that. So that's where we are, but certainly Christine and managers are on the call if there's any questions, which I see several. So back to you,
Yep,
Sandy.
I've got a speakers list, Ellen, Anna, and then Mark. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ian, I was just wondering about the forecast here for the revenue from the parks. I mean, as you said, June's a critical month. That makes a huge difference. And I'm just wondering, I guess part of it's because you still have all your startup expenses. You're only going to have 2 months of operation potentially instead of 3. Because that really jumps up come June 28th. That figure escalates quite a bit. What also about the seasonal campers? Do we just prorate their fees, or because it just seems like we lose a lot of revenue just by the month of June? It seems a little disproportionate. I don't know if you could shed some more light on that for me. Thanks.
I see Jen's unmuted as well. And I'll let her speak to this, but it does hinge on what reopening includes as well, how much of our services we will include. But Jen, can you provide specifics, please?
Sure. So when this all started, we had a look at 3 different scenarios in the conservation areas based on just our best understanding of what could possibly happen. So the June 1st scenario was everything open as per usual, nightly camping, seasonal camping, day use, boating. And so essentially we lost a month of our business. June 28th was based on no camping and opening for day use only. And then of course, the final one was based on not being able to open anything at all. So those are the three scenarios that are shown in the report. Sorry, was the second part. The seasonal campers their rates have been prorated based on the number of nights that they will be with us. So.
Ellen?
Okay, good, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, Anna?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question was very similar to Ellen's question about the difference between the 1st of June and June the 28th. So thank you very much, Jen, for that explanation. I do have another question, though, but before I ask it, I want to thank staff for the report or this update. I think it's really important that we as members get these reports, and I hope they will continue as we deal with COVID in the next number of months. My question, I guess, is around the vacancies that we have with our full-time staff and the 8, I assume. What are, I also know that we're deploying staff in other areas as well. So what are the plans there? Are there concerns that without these full-time staff people that we are challenged, and what will be the plan as well in hiring, or are we freezing hiring? I'd like a little bit more of an understanding on what our protocol right now is when it comes to hiring going into the next month or so.
Yeah, through the chair, good question. So on the vacancy side, I will say we've had a few staff choose to move on to other opportunities, and we've used that, frankly, as an opportunity for us to manage the vacancies. They are technical positions largely, so it becomes a little difficult. And your question about what is the impact on our business, that's an ongoing tomorrow. And it's this balance between what we keep calling a financial brick wall and the fact that we are still delivering many programs for public safety purposes. And we feel our commitment has to be for public safety first, and we'll figure out the money later. And frankly, the province has identified some of our business as essential services. So Anna, I don't have a straight answer, but we're very conscious of that. And we look to our colleagues at the Grand and at the Essex who have made staff cuts, but they've been very selective about where those cuts are based on delivering priority services. So that's what our thinking is. I don't have an answer. We're just very mindful of that. The second thing you asked about a hiring freeze, we were using that terminology, frankly, and that was kind of the initial strategy. But at this point, we are not using that term. We are trying to defer hiring or delay hiring as much as possible. But again, if it's a critical part of our business, if we have a legal obligation to deliver the service, a public safety obligation, and there is a vacancy, we will be hiring for those positions. If somehow we can manage by redeploying staff or dealing with it another way, we will do that. But it's very case by case. So we are not issuing a blanket hiring freeze at this point. We don't think that's responsible. Okay.
Thank you for that information, Ian, and through the chair, I just want to again say how important these updates are to the board, that as we go through COVID, look forward to further updates from you as well. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I guess my question through the chair to Ian is probably out through to Ian Wilcox and to Jen Howley. I guess it's the next point. There's a bit of this question would have already been answered. Deferred seasonal hiring. 49 seasonal staff has been deferred or eliminated for 2020, pending provincial approval to resume near normal operations. Is that a lot of that in the conservation areas, or is that in other areas from reforestation to other areas that the flood control and whatnot that the UTRCA? Because obviously seasonal time of year, it comes down to quantity and quality. You have to hire that many people, but you also want good people. And some of those people, because their position's been deferred, may not be available if you decide to go ahead and hire a few of them still on July 1st.
I'll start and Jen can provide details, but absolutely the majority of those deferred hirings are the conservation areas, but you've touched on tree planting and there are other positions, but by far the conservation areas are the bulk of those staff. And obviously Jen's busy trying to hire a bunch of them right now. So Jen, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So actually we started our hiring process back at the end of February this year, and Fanshawe and Piddock were able to get through the entire process and actually offer jobs verbally to seasonal staff. And Wildwood was able to get halfway through the process, and that would explain why there were a later start date. We kept in touch with those staff throughout this pandemic time, just to stay in touch, and with some hopes that we'd be able to bring them on. And sure enough, when we found out we were able to actually open the campground, we started calling staff and had a great response of people, wanting to come back and start work with us. So we've been fortunate that way. Wildwood is just finishing up a few additional interviews. But for staff that aren't coming back as per se would be our lifeguards. So we hire our own lifeguards at Piddock and at Fanshawe, and we will not be opening our swimming pools this summer. And so, lifeguards won't be coming back. Staff are working with the absolute bare minimum. We won't be bringing on all of our customer service staff right away. If nightly camping doesn't happen, then that makes our operation look a little bit different. We can do a lot of transactions just through the front gate. Obviously, we don't need those registration offices. So we're bringing staff on as the program ramps up, if it does ramp up.
Mark, anything else?
No, that answers the question well. Like I sort of said it, and my question comes down to quantity and quality sometimes, because people are trying to get back to university and continue courses and whatnot towards their career direction, and all of a sudden they find out they obviously, well, outside the UTRCA's control, obviously, cannot take their line of work or the job that they wanted. Then all of a sudden, maybe they take a job at a factory or something else to make time go forward. And then also suddenly you lose some quality people as well. So it's good that a lot of them are still being hired on. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Paul, then Ellen.
Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair. My question was very similar to Mark's, and between his question and Jen's answer, the questions I had have been answered. So thank you.
Okay, Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just getting back to Jen's comment there a minute ago, I just wanted to confirm that pools are shut down for the season. That's it. They're done. I hadn't heard of the province that, I guess they were talking about that they wouldn't be allowed them open, but I wasn't 100% sure. But
Jen, do you want?
Yeah, so right now, obviously swimming pools are not allowed to be open as part of the emergency order. We have opted not to open ours just because we wanted to be upfront and honest with our seasonals as to what they're going to be paying for the season. There obviously are, going to be services and programs that we're not going to be able to offer, as well as it's a very expensive item to offer in the campground. and it was from a money saving perspective.
Anything else, Ellen? I see he's muted. So I'll go to Nancy.
Yeah, just wondering about the training, like the health and safety one, for example. I know gets done every year with the new people that we hire, plus ones that are returning to work. So are plans made around that particular training? Any other training that we're going to be looking at these new people that we're bringing on seasonally going to do?
Jen?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, obviously we didn't host orientation day like we typically would, where we bring everybody together and start that way. Training has been modified to be very small groups, and that also has dictated some of the phase in of our opening as to who we can get trained and what needs to get done. And first and foremost, staff health and safety will always be first and foremost, but staff will be reminded that, you know, if they're not feeling well, to let us know, or don't come to work. You know, are you comfortable doing this job? There's going to be things that come up that I'm sure we haven't thought of in all this planning. And so the very first question is, you know, are you comfortable doing this? If if they have to share a truck with somebody with a mask, are you comfortable with that? So it's taken a little bit of work, and it's a little bit longer, but you know what? It's going to be worth it in the end. And again, our messaging to our seasonal campers was they need to be patient with us as well. Things will take a little bit longer because we want to make sure that we've got all our checks and measures in place.
Great, thanks.
Okay. I've got a question maybe for Ian or Christine. Am I correct that unlike municipalities, we are okay with running a operating deficit?
Yeah, Christine can chime in too, but yes, we are not legislated the same as municipalities for balanced budget. So we have a bit more flexibility, but Christine doesn't like it. So Christine, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Nobody should like a deficit budget, but yes, we do. We do have them. We have had them. Sometimes we approve a surplus budget and it turns out to be a deficit at the end of the year, and vice versa. This year, the board approved a deficit budget. It's going to be a deficit budget this year, without a doubt. But no, we, as Ian said, we can operate at a deficit as long as we don't do it a long time. So, yeah, we don't actually have that much corporate oversight, luckily. That's it.
Okay, so in terms of where does the money come from, given Ian's earlier comment about it's not going to be from our member municipalities, we do have an operating line of credit, is that correct?
Yes. The operating line of credit will be used for cash needs, and we don't have cash needs. What we need to be focused on are our revenues and expenses for this year. And if we have not enough revenues and too much expenses, or some combination of both, we're going to actually have a deficit. That will have to be covered through reserves at the end of the year. All that earlier accumulated surplus that we've created, and any reserve balances that we have. So that's how a deficit would be covered.
The concern being, unlike some municipalities like London that has very large 8-figure reserves, we don't have those kinds of reserves. So are we really knocking on the door of both the province and the feds for the money they owe us for a number of projects?
The money they owe us is already in our revenues and expenses.
As deferred,
So-
correct?
No,
Or
in
actually,
fact,
we've taken it out, you're right.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
Yeah.
this is why we have that big amount that the feds owe us. We've already recorded that as a revenue.
Okay.
So we're only waiting for the cash.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, and back to Ian for a minute. Ian, you're coming to the June meeting with a recommendation, I take it, on how we proceed. If the board decides one of the ways to deal with this in a small way is foregoing stipends, is that a board decision or an individual decision?
That's an excellent question. I've never been in a position where this is considered. I would argue it's an individual position. Just thinking on the move here. Each of you received your appointment to the board of directors from your municipality based on an expectation of a per diem and travel expense, and the chair and vice chair receive a stipend on top of that. So my recommendation, just thinking on the fly, would be it's an individual decision.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, so a question I hadn't thought of earlier, but it comes regarding the CEWS, the emergency wage subsidy. My understanding was that we were initially approved and that we actually were sent roughly $300,000. So is that correct? And if we were sent that money, now that we've not, the approval's been rescinded, do we have to send that money back?
Ian or Christine?
Yeah, I'll look to Chris. Yeah, I'll look to Christine as well. But you're right, Paul. We had approval from what we consider approval from a CRA staff person, and yes, we have the check in our account, and we're in no rush to return it. But my assumption, and I'll look to Christine to verify, is they're going to ask for it back. But the longer we have it in our account, earning a little bit of interest, the better. Christine, did you have anything to add?
Yes, that's exactly right. In fact, we have over 600,000 from the federal government now, because the day after we applied for the second month's grant or claim, that was when we were told we would not be eligible. So the second application was already in. We've got the cash. I'm happy to sit on it until somebody sends me a letter and says, please repay. But until that happens, I'm just holding it. It's not in the operating statement that you see at all, because it is so uncertain that we'll be able to keep it. It's a stretch, but it is possible they'll allow us to keep the first amount, the first 300, because we were given a verbal okay, and I have the agent's name and number. So they may have to live by that.
Is there any appeal process on this second decision, or do we got to live with what they've told us the second time around?
I didn't get much joy when I asked that question, but I do have their description that they use for the interpretation of our eligibility. And I honestly haven't had time to read it, because they seemed pretty clear we wouldn't be eligible. We were deemed to be a public sector body. I think there's a basis to fight that, but I haven't pursued that quite yet. We're working on other projects at the moment. But yes, it's on my plate.
Yes, your hands are, yeah, your plate is overflowing. So Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. Okay.
I saw Mark's hand, but it went down. So I'll move to Anna and then Brian.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair and back to Christine. Thanks, Paul, for this question, because I find it quite interesting how we got up wondering how things worked. And I was interested to know where the $600,000 is put. If it's not in our operating statement, how are we knowing where it is, and how's the reporting back through the financial statements? So where can we see this number and how it's reported out? To Christine, through you, Mr. Chair.
So the money actually came in May. The reports you have in front of you only go to the end of April. So you won't have seen it. The money that we've received is sitting on our balance sheet as a liability at the moment, because it could be owed back to the government. So I'm not calling it revenue for this year. We're not calling it any kind of subsidy. It's in this, it's in the same place where we hold funds for other organizations, for Friends of Medway Creek and the Thames River Cleanup. We hold funds for other people, and they're held on the balance sheet.
Thank you for that. I assume it's just like a trust account kind of thing.
Exactly right.
Anything else, Anna? Nope. Brian.
I'm going to stick on the CWS. I was extremely happy when they first said we qualified for it, and I thank you for all your work. I'm sure it was a lot of work to try to go through this and get it. Highly disappointed when we hear the reversal on that. Again, I would like us not to, again, maybe not right now is the time, but I would like us not just drop this. It's going to significantly impact our operations and our bottom line. Especially in the news. I won't name who they are, but I'm sure we've heard that some, I'll say all the political parties were able to access this money. So it's a little bit, I know it's CRA rules and stuff like that, but I believe that, especially with the conservation authorities, those are self-sustaining. Those are more like businesses rather than public sector things. The government's asked us to keep those separate in their new rules or their new wants of rules. Whether we can reach out to our politicians and say, hey, this is what's happened. We don't agree with it. It's going to and explain our situation, how it's going to affect our situation. So maybe we can have a reversal, or in the future we can have clarity on that. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions for Christine or Ian on the report 8.3? Seeing none, moving on to 8.4, Christine, the year-to-date financial update. Is there any additional information you want to direct us to?
At this point, no. You've noticed the large amount that the federal government still owes us, which is another reason I'm not inclined to send back federal dollars quite so fast, because they owe us almost $3 million anyway. So you can see that certainly user fees are down. Our total revenue is down, so are our expenses, which is a really good thing. But April is still a fairly early month. We had been in lockdown only 6 weeks at this point. A lot of the activity, a lot of the purchasing, a lot of the spending would have continued into March that would normally have happened. So we're not, at the end of April, we're not really seeing a lot of decline in financial activity. It started towards the end of April and has certainly happened in May. So I'm very curious to see what this May statement will look like come out next week. But there isn't terribly much that's remarkable here, except to remind people that our spending is not even over the course of the year. All our levy drops in the month of April for the entire year. A lot of our park spending normally happens in March and April. This hasn't happened so much this year. So it's, even by the end of April, it's a little bit soon to draw heavy conclusions or definitive conclusions about the financial picture. But you can bet we've been working on it pretty steadily. Any questions?
Not seeing any hands. So I think we'll move on to 8.5, the Motherwell Blacksmith Shop. Alex or Bill, did you have any additional information? I know there may have been some additional information since the report was written.
Yes, maybe I'll start through you, Mr. Chair. The report was also written by Bill Mackey and Tracy Annett, who are also here to answer any questions. Do you want to deal, we were asked to come back to the board following the delegation in January with some background information, and is this something that we want to chat about first, any of the background information, or maybe Bill? Sorry.
Maybe what I'll start with the questions. I had a couple of people before the meeting.
Okay.
First would be Anna Marie and then Paul.
I guess my question was, reading the report, if we do repair the roof, do we have a sense of any rental income that could be generated from that repaired facility?
Maybe I'll pass that one question to Bill. Are you there?
Yes, yep. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Anna Maria. We did previously rent it for $1,200 a year. Once it was repaired, we could possibly re-rent it. I don't have anybody in mind that would come forward and rent it at that rate right now, but that is a possibility.
Anna Marie,
Thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Is there any heritage value of this building other than it was an old building that was part of the Motherwell hamlet? Like, was there a famous blacksmith that worked there or something? I'm hesitant about spending money on something that apparently doesn't have a real use other than some storage, but is there other reason other than the fact that it's really old that we would be even interested in fixing it up?
I can answer that. Through you, Mr. Chair. All the buildings in Motherwell, we have talked to the West Perth Heritage folks, and none of them have been designated. The heritage value seems to be mainly with the local community as opposed to any organized heritage society. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, I saw Joe and then Anna.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, has there been any discussions with the local group about them fundraising or any financial support for this from them?
Again, I can take that one through you, Mr. Chair. To Joe, we had the presentation from the local heritage group in January. We have had one individual come forth with a proposal. We have not heard anything from the group regarding, well, anything, financial aid or uses for the building other than just to repair them and fix them up.
Thank you.
Okay. Anna, then Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jill asked my question, so just as a follow-up to that, are we going to reach out to the Heritage Group and ask them what their plans are, or if they can contribute somehow to the costs through you to staff?
I'd like Ian, you want to jump in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. And, you know, staff are continuing to discuss this issue. The context of the board report, these lands and buildings were purchased originally for a dam and reservoir project. The intention was always that the buildings would be removed. But certainly with the closure of the dam and reservoir project a few years ago, it opens the door to other options. However, we are still a conservation authority. These buildings are in hazard lands. We need to ensure that a plan for the future of the village conforms to our own mandate, our own regulations, our own policies around repair and reuse, and even proposals for what I would call development or changes of use. So at this point, Anna, we're being very a little bit cautious, and we're trying to sort out internally first, what do we believe the future of the village could be that conforms with our own requirements, with good planning, with public safety, but also recognizing the local interest, community interest in preserving the village. So the report you have in front of you was just background information as was requested. But, you know, as staff, Tracy, Alex, Bill, and I have discussed this, and I've mentioned it to Sandy. I think we'd be prepared as staff to come forward with recommendation at the June meeting for the future, not only of the blacksmith shop, but the whole village. I mean, there's only 3 other buildings, but we would like to deal with it as a package. So at this point, you know, us reaching out or encouraging.
Okay.
Yes, it would end up being in camera. But at this point, we're not reaching out to the community to encourage a whole ton of ideas or enthusiasm or expectations until we have a good handle on what we feel is appropriate. And we believe there's definitely limits because of its location and hazard in regulated areas. So I don't know, Alex, Bill, or Tracy, did that cover our conversation? Looks like it.
Okay. Anna, anything else?
Yeah, thank you for that, Ian. So this is just an update. We're not deciding on anything, and I will look forward to your recommendations, I guess, at our next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
I guess my question wants to maybe back up before I was sitting on the board myself. I don't want this conversation to go longer than it needs to, but with the change in floodplain mapping all the time, and of course weather patterns and whatnot, would it ever see that this Glengowan Dam and Reservoir project could be revived? I'm not talking about 2 years from now, but 20 years from now. And in the meantime, we've spent a lot of monies and times reviving this Motherwell village just for the sake of, as they say, flooding it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good comment to your first point with climate change and, you know, what the more intense storms. Our discussions around the future of the Glengowan project, we did seriously consider that were we being short-sighted in canceling the project because perhaps it could be of value later. But the decision the authority and the board came to was Glengowan was designed in the 70s for a very specific purpose, mainly flow augmentation. And to take that design and repurpose it for, you know, a slightly different use around climate change seemed limiting. So to us, it still seemed appropriate to cancel that project as it was designed. But that does not preclude us from developing any new project. It could be in the same location, or it could be somewhere else in the watershed if that was deemed more beneficial. So that's the one side. The other side is your comment about reinvesting in the village, and would we be, limiting future options? That's absolutely something we are thinking about as staff, and that kind of thinking will inform the recommendation that we'll bring forward in June. So I'll leave it there.
Mark, anything else? Okay, I see no hands. So I'm going to ask the members, I've often been criticized for not giving people a stretch break. Do we need a stretch break before we finish up? I don't see any hands up. A whole bunch of people are muted. So we'll press on. 8.6, the Section 28 report, Tracy. I assume just you're here to answer questions?
Yes, and our regulations officers are on the line as well. So if you have any specific questions, we can pass them along to those folks too.
I'm looking for hands on the participant screen. I don't see any. Whoop, yes, I do. Brian, then Anna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the report's always nice to read. Extremely disturbed by the amount of violations. People are trying to, we've had the same thing in town with people trying to sneak in their home so they think they'll get stuff done. But I'm sure, how much added work has this added to your workload with people just taking on projects and not asking? This looks above normal to me.
Yes,
Tracy?
through the chair. Yes, through the chair, Brian, that's exactly it. It does take a lot more workload. I think just given the times, a lot of assumptions are out there that because so many activities are closed, that there aren't people on the lookout. And as you can see, most of those violations come to us from either residents in the neighborhood or other municipal contacts that we have that have come upon something as well. So this is certainly higher than normal and taking a substantial amount of time.
Anna?
Yes, thank you for the report, and I too found it very disturbing, and I just heard that there is an uptake, and not sure what the uptake is and why we're seeing more violations, Tracy. But I do want to follow up with Brian's question about the violations and the amount of work that staff have to deal with. And does staff have to work with municipalities, or how are municipalities informed of these violations, or where does it go with municipalities? And then a follow-up question to that would be, is there any violation that we should be aware of that is a major concern? Not that all violations aren't concerns.
Sure. In respect to the municipalities, it really varies on who brings it to our attention. Sometimes it's other building officials that are on site because they too are investigating a violation, or even our woodlands conservation bylaw officers. As you can imagine, many woodlands also contain wetlands that we would regulate. Our drainage superintendents as well. So various staff from our municipal departments can bring those activities to our attention. As with your follow-up question, sorry, it's just escaping me right now.
It is just about the violations, not that all of them are not serious, but is there something or anyone that we should be aware of?
At this time, I think most of the violations, again, there are different levels of severity, but at the same time, it's also part and parcel with the willingness of the violator, the landowner, the person doing their wanting to work with us. And I think that's been the common case, is that yes, people have been caught proceeding with activities without permissions in advance, but certainly they're willing to work with us to rectify the situation. So like I say, it's kind of a balance there. I don't think we've seen any major violations yet where we haven't had a willing a landowner or person wanting to restore. I can raise the question to our regs officers who are also on the meeting too, if they have anything further to add.
Seeing none. Mark? Then
Yeah,
Alan?
thanks a lot, Sandy. I just wanted to thank Tracy because I've communicated with her on the Brick Pond and wetlands in Woodstock, and to me, if there's a violation that, for me anyway, jumps off the page, it's that one, because interfering with a wetland was sort of the comment on the violation going on there. Because in the city of Woodstock, for example, which I'm not an engineer, don't pretend to be when I don't play one on TV either, the Sudsworth Park across Springbank in Woodstock, which is kind of almost creates a triangle effect between Brick Pond wetlands and the Dufferin Street and whatnot, is become, used to be a municipal park where kids could go on a swing and whatnot, but that park has now become really a bog more than anything else. And to see that somebody would be interfering with the wetland across the street, which would greatly be affecting the ability to maintain water control and water levels, is really saddening in my mind. Not sure if Tracy's got a further comment on that, but that's just the one that kind of jumps off the page for me.
Tracy?
Also letting everybody on the board know that is a problem in the city of Woodstock, is the Sudsworth Park, which was sort of a municipal green space park with a swing and a slide years ago, has turned into a bit of a bog and a pond.
Tracy?
Yes, through the chair. I'll actually ask Karen if she wants to follow up on that. She's been very involved with that area over the years. So.
Through the chair, I know Anna asked about if there's any major violations out there. I think how major it is depends on whether or not it's in your municipality. So the Brick Ponds wetland, there's a lot of stuff going on there. So maybe Mark, you and I can touch base later on, because Brick Ponds, it's a different kettle of fish, so to speak, with everything going on there and just the drainage and flooding problems in that area in general and all the development that's happened over time. So maybe I'll touch base with you separately on that one, because it's more of a site-specific issue.
Okay. Ellen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I was just wondering a little bit about the one in Middlesex Center involving the county and the provincial ministry staff dealing with the as has been mentioned, we have a number of violations and it's rather upsetting, but this one kind of confuses me too, because you'd think they could, if it's county property, there's illegal parking, they could block it by the road. Why they're bringing truckloads of fill in closer to the river? I mean, it's bad enough when private individuals and contractors do this, but we've even got the county and the provincial staff that aren't even working on our side. It seems, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that one really seemed upsetting.
Are you looking for an answer or a comment from staff, Ellen?
Is there any more insight on that one? Am I misinterpreting that? Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion, but to me it seems really a bad one. Can staff maybe explain it a little bit more so I'm not quite so distressed by it?
Yes, through the chair to Alan. So you'll notice that one, and then excuse me, we also had the one in Thames Center where the municipality there has been putting paths in through areas where we wouldn't necessarily want trail systems. So we're trying to work with, they're both municipalities, and we like to have a good relationship with our municipal partners. I don't know exactly how both these happened. The one in Middlesex Center, the county, and the provincial parks, they were aware of the major sediment spill we had across the river 2 years ago in that exact same area. So that's when all the fill started coming in here. Actually, I've been getting phone calls about that one as recently as this morning. I got another email about the fill beside the river there. So I've been to the site. I talked to the county about it. They know they need permits. They're trying to block off the area for parking access to the provincial park. So there is, I can see the rationale for bringing the fill in. They're trying to make sort of a berm and to prevent parking. It would have been nice if we got a heads up on that one. Likewise, the one in Thames Center. Thames Center, we're trying to work with both groups going forward. So I don't know what else to say. They knew the rules, but I guess things just happen. Projects get out of control before people realize that they should have maybe picked up the phone and called us first.
Okay, thank you. Marie.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Alan. You're done? Okay. Marie?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I had kind of the same questions as Alan had, and a couple of the comments that were made in response. I guess I'm wondering where these violations, how much do you think they're intentional versus just not knowing? And if they just don't know that they should be applying, perhaps, I mean, what could be done to make them more aware? I mean, it's good you catch them all in a way, and I understand they're reported, but I'm wondering where the problem lies, whether it's intentional or just not knowing.
Well, I think some of our municipalities in the last few years, there's been a large turnover of staff. So historically, the staff we were dealing with before, everybody worked together. We all kind of knew to call each other and had more of a relationship maintenance, so to speak. But with all the staff turnovers, there's been a lot of retirement. Just that demographic bubble with the baby boomers all retiring. So there's been such a staff turnover, and there's only 3 regs officers, so it's hard for us to kind of maintain contact with everybody at the municipality. I mean, we deal with the building officials for some projects, and the drainage supers are the ones we normally deal with. So to necessarily touch base with new park staff or new road staff or new public works staff, it's hard to keep touch base with everybody. We have been trying to do kind of like little tailgate talks with the municipalities. We did it 2 years ago, but we just didn't have time to do it last year, to kind of meet with all their staff and go over our rules and regulations and, you know, how we can work better together with communication. It's hard to do that with only 3 staff, 3 reg staff here and an army of municipal staff at some of the municipalities in our watershed. But we've tried, but sometimes these things slip through.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Thank
you. I guess it's formal and informal as well, and it's those informal ones have to build up over years. So thank you.
Okay. I see no further questions. So we'll move on to the FYI. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 10, other business. I'll let Ian go first.
So you had one there, Sandy, from Brian.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Brian.
I just wanted to recognize all those poor dogs and cats that are going to lose their owners as a return to work phase. I love the picture of the dog spending time with their owner there. So just wanted to recognize the winners of this pandemic and the losers of returning to work. But that's all.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, Ian, you have some remarks and some passings of previous board members to note.
Yeah, I will say, first of all, thanks again to everyone for accommodating this meeting through this technology. I know we still have some glitches here and there. Again, if you have ideas or suggestions or comments after the meeting, please let me know. Between Chris and I and Michelle, we're trying to make this work as smoothly as possible. And Sandy and Alan have done a great job chairing under new circumstances. The only other comments, kind of sad news, with many people having served on the Upper Thames board, it's inevitable there's some passing. I was quite surprised to hear that Carol Tattersall, those from Oxford County probably would know Carol, passed away. She was quite young at only 55. She was on the board of directors from 1992 till 1996. At the time, we had provincial appointees, and I think our chair, Sandy, was a provincial appointee in the past. And she would have been one of the last appointees before those were eliminated. So she was there for 5 years. She also then moved on, worked for Oxford County as tree commissioner. So our staff knew Carol quite well, and she was always a huge supporter of conservation. So that's sad. We will plant a tree, and we've made a donation in her memory. Secondly, and probably more personal for me, Dr. Douglas Bocking passed away recently, and Doug was on the board for 12 years from 1992 till 2003, representing City of London, very well known in London, very prominent, gracious, humble gentleman. I worked with Doug very directly for a number of years. He led, while he was a board member, he was the one who led the designation of the Thames as a Canadian Heritage River. So for 4 years, Doug and I worked side by side with other staff. We always joke he was a staff member for 4 years. In 1997, he received an award of merit from the Canadian Heritage River System. And even 2 weeks before his passing, he was emailing staff asking for reports and wanting to be updated. When he did pass away, he was 4 weeks short of his 100th birthday. So he did well. And again, he'll be recognized. We'll plant a tree, and we've made a donation in his memory. So those were two important leaders for the Upper Thames that I thought it was worth mentioning. So that's my remarks, Sandy.
Thank you, Ian. I wanted to go back to Tony's earlier challenge of the chair. I was doing a little scrambling, and there's some question in a variety of places about what you do at that point. And Tony, I'm going to give Tony the benefit of the doubt in this, and that it does need a second, and there is debate. It is debatable, according to Bernay and some Roberts. So Tony, I don't know if you had a second for that. Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of wonder if the previous discussion, earlier discussion, hasn't prejudiced the direction and thoughts of the other directors. And I just question, I guess, how we approach this with an open mind and in consideration of the actual Robert's rules. So yeah, now it might be difficult to revisit this and explain it appropriately, but I'll go back a little bit. So I don't know how far you want to go into this.
Well, it's really only on challenging the ruling of the chair.
Right.
And is there a seconder for that challenge? I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not hearing anybody. Is there a seconder for the challenge of the chair? I'll call it a third time. Is there a seconder for the challenge of the chair? Seeing none.
I think Hugh's hand's up. Sandy just came up.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
I must have missed it. My apologies. So Tony, you can start the debate.
Yeah,
on
thank you,
overturning the rule of the chair.
Right. So yeah, on the bottom of page 255, there is an appeal process in the 11th edition. The ruling of the chair, I guess, kind of flies in the face of the fundamental principles of parliamentary law that cannot be suspended. The rule rules that are so basic that it's held to be inviolate or unsuspendable, I guess, cannot be overturned or suspended. The rules around the motion to object to the consideration of the question is a rule of parliamentary procedure or a rule of order so basic that it's held to be inviolate or unsuspendable. And what that really says is we cannot suspend the rules of bylaws of parliamentary procedure, as I understand it. And really, it goes back to the objection to the consideration of the question, of which whenever debate has began, an objection to the consideration of question motion cannot be brought forward and upheld. So that's my position, I guess, that objection to consideration, which killed the main motion that was duly seconded back in our previous meetings, could not be voted on with the objection to consideration. And these are all well defined and documented in Robert's Rules as parliamentary procedures that we need to follow. The other thing that I would say is I had submitted my point of order in writing, which I understood was going to be shared with the board. And I don't believe it was shared with the board. At least it wasn't shared back with me. So that would help people understand the direction and the point that I'm trying to raise today.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Then Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Tony's point that the right to point of order is absolutely fundamental. However, it wasn't raised in the proper time, and that's why I voted to sustain the chair's decision. While you have the right to point of order, it must be made at the time and not at a later date. So I would maintain my position of sustaining the chair's decision.
Marie.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a few issues with this. Number one, this was brought up at the last meeting last month, and it was deferred so that we could all see it in writing. And then I never received anything. And I thought about it when I was reading the minutes of the last meeting. I said, and I saw nothing on the agenda dealing with this. And I thought, well, I guess it was either dropped and for whatever reason, and decided not to bring it forward. So I have an objection to it being kind of thrown at us right here at the last minute when there was a month to have it presented. And I think when you're talking about something very technical like this, there was a reason to defer it, and it just wasn't followed up on for whatever reason. So I object to something this technical being brought up at the last minute again, especially after it was deferred. And I don't quite understand what the point of it is, quite frankly. So those are just my comments.
Ellen, Tony, I'll come back to you to conclude the debate as the mover. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not sure where to start here. I think we could talk about this for quite some time and go around in circles, and we seem to be getting further down the rabbit hole, because it all goes back to a motion that was introduced at our February meeting, and there was a lot of confusion and concern about that motion. And if I recall, it was Anna and Marie that raised concerns about the wording of the motion, and the board was quite uncertain how to deal with this. We decided to get legal advice. We went in camera. I guess our mistake was that we did debate this. We did discuss this before having the vote. But I think it was done in good faith. We wanted to get a better understanding of what Tony's motion was and what it involved. we asked him to change the wording. He didn't want to change the wording. And so we felt that it wasn't something we could consider. And so we passed that motion to refuse to consider. And of course, you know, Tony's challenged it and it came back at the last meeting. And we're just getting further and further away from the main point. I think if we hadn't given so much leeway, if we just said, no, let's vote against this, I think the motion would have been defeated. The budget vote carried. I don't think that would have changed. I don't think any of this changes anything. I think we're just, as I say, we're just getting further bogged down in details here. I think obviously everybody pulls out different Robert's rules and Bernot's rules and parliamentary procedure, and we get further confused. But I think our error was that we've tried to give too much leeway. We've tried to debate things, and then we find out, well, that wasn't debatable. We should have voted right away. I really don't think this is going to be helpful getting any further into this. I myself am getting confused. As I mentioned here, we had the vote earlier in the meeting, and I voted. I'm not sure that I voted correctly. I thought we were voting on the appeal, but I think we were voting on the chair's ruling. And so I'm to the point now where I just think that Tony's raised his concerns. We do need to clean up the rules of procedure for our organization, but let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Anna?
Yes, and I just want to thank the members for their comments, and I am getting more confused as we talk about this, and I would like to find a way out of this confusion. And I would like to ask Tony how he sees us coming out of this.
Tony, you're going to wrap up the debate. So Anna, once you get a response from Tony, is that sufficient, or do you have other matters on this question? Because
no, I'm looking forward to hearing if he wants to wrap up. I just, I'm at a loss now with what he's asking for, given I haven't received information.
well, that's not the issue. I'm sorry to interrupt. The issue is on the point of order. We are debating the decision of the chair, period. And the decision of the chair is what we're debating. So the question is not to Tony as to what Tony wants. The debate is on the ruling of the chair. And should the ruling of the chair be sustained, that there is no point of order that on the point of order is not, the point of order that Tony raised is moot. That's it. That's the debate.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I see no additional hands, so I'll ask Tony to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just want to try to follow the procedure and the bylaws as best as possible. I do want to address Director Petrie's comment. So you're right. Point of orders have to be timely, but there are exceptions, and I would like to read directly from Robert's rules, if I may, just how this is relative. The only exception to the rule of point of orders must be made at the time of breach arise in connection with breaches that are of a continuing nature, in which case a point of order can be made at any time during the continuance of the breach. And instances of this kind occur when, and these are exceptions, any action has been taken in violation with the fundamental principles of parliamentary law. And then on page 263, it goes into fundamental principles, which are Robert's Rules of Order and so on and so forth. So my opening comment about rules that are basic parliamentary principles that cannot be suspended, this would qualify in accepting an objection to the consideration of question, and it allows a point of order to be raised after the fact. And that's where I'm coming from. Director Petrie. So I'm just trying to follow Robert's Rules of Orders and our bylaws and parliamentary procedures. So thank you for your consideration, but I believe the appeal is appropriate and suits the circumstance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So Michelle, I see no further hands. Chris, are you seeing any?
No.
Okay, Michelle, could you call the roll? And the question is, shall the decision of the chair be upheld?
Marie Blosh. Marie?
Can't find her on the participants list, sorry.
Oh.
There she is, yep.
Marie?
Unmute.
There she is. You need to unmute, Marie.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Alan. We'll come back. Go ahead, Alan.
The motion, it's moved by Tony and seconded by
Hugh.
And the motion is what?
Well, the motion was he's challenging the chair's decision on the point of order. That the point of order was moot. So the question before the board is, shall the decision of the chair be upheld?
Great this time, because I got it mixed up last time.
So if you agree with the decision of the chair, you vote yes. If you disagree with the decision of the chair, you vote no.
Okay, because that's where I got mixed up last time, because I thought the motion was to appeal and a vote say yes, you're supporting the appeal. Okay, I want to make sure we're clear on what we're voting on. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Michelle?
Marie Blosh. Right. So the lack of a response is an abstention. Alan Dale.
Sorry, Marie's there. I vote yes.
Anna Hopkins.
Yes.
Tony Jackson.
No.
Nancy Manning.
Abstain.
Hugh McDermott. Hugh? Can you unmute your microphone?
No.
Thank you. Paul Mitchell.
Yes.
Anne Marie Murray.
Yes.
Brian Petrie.
Yes.
Jim Reffel.
Yes.
Joe Salter.
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg.
Yes.
Alex Westman.
Yes.
And Sandy Levin.
Yes.
10 yes. 2 no and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. See no other business. I see no other hands. Ellen, your motion to adjourn, are you in agreement?
Yes, I'm in agreement with that. Thank you.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the warm day. Stay safe. Stay well.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.